Donald J. Trump. On November 8th, 2016, after one of the most contentious elections in the history of the United States, he defied analytics site 538, who calculated the likelihood of a Trump victory at just 28% to become the 45th president of the United States. However, being that Trump lost the popular vote by almost 3 million people, how exactly was this victory possible? As many of you know, the U.S. population does not directly elect its president. Instead, we work under a system known as the Electoral College. In short, there are a total of 538 electoral votes. Those votes are divided amongst the 50 states according to their population. When the citizens of a state vote on election day, the candidate with the highest number of individual votes receives 100% of the state's electoral votes. When the candidate's electoral count reaches 270, well, as they say, it's a wrap. Unfortunately, the nature of the Electoral College is that where it's theoretically possible for a candidate not to receive a single vote in 39 of the 50 states and still become president by winning 11 of the 12 states with the largest electorate by only 51%. Imagine the frustration of being on the wrong side of that election. Today, I'd like to identify some of the flaws of the current election process, as well as propose a proportional system that is more representative of the general population. So in order to propose an improvement of the Electoral College, we must first understand why it was initially established. Many have speculated as to why the Founding Fathers didn't just enact a pure democracy, where the candidate who simply receives the greatest amount of individual votes becomes the president. Well, the issue here is that if the election were determined entirely by popular vote, it would enable regions with the highest concentration of people to dictate the candidate, while ignoring the unique needs of smaller density areas. For example, the needs and desires of rural areas with a low population density would just not be relevant to the urban areas with higher density, whose votes would vastly outnumber the former. The second president of the United States, John Adams, once explained that pure democracy is simply the tyranny of the majority, showcasing the intent of the Founding Fathers when creating the Electoral College. So it works by evenly distributing voter influence. It artificially increases the influence of smaller states and regions as a way of warranting voters with different lifestyles and perspectives a more prominent voice than they would have in a pure popular vote. So we've established the thought behind allotting a number of electorates to a state rather than simply tallying up their total number of votes. But how does the current system hinder representation? Well, the true problem of the Electoral College lies in the winner-take-all nature of the electoral delegation. As previously stated, the candidate with the greatest number of individual votes receives all of the state's electoral votes. For example, Donald Trump received all of North Carolina's 15 electorates after narrowly defeating Clinton by a margin of 175,000 out of the 4.5 million North Carolinians who voted in the election. Needless to say, there are several problems with this means of distribution. Firstly, and most prominently, is the lack of proportional representation in so-called safe states, or states that have reliably awarded their electorates to a single party. California, the most populous state, has voted to give their 55 electorates to the Democratic nominee for the past 20 years. However, according to the U.S. National Archives, in 2012, 5 million Californians, or 40% of their total voter turnout, voted Republican, yet 100% of their electorates were awarded to the Democratic nominee. This is a common trend among safe states, and due to the winner-take-all system, Fairvote.org has calculated that almost 70% of all votes cast in the 2012 presidential election did little to actually affect the outcome. In many situations, citizens are discouraged from voting at all. They simply feel their vote won't actually contribute if they deviate from the peers that outnumber them. For example, someone living in Alabama who supports the Democratic nominee may refrain from voting. This is because historically, Alabama is almost certain to award their electoral votes to the Republican nominee. On a small scale, this phenomenon perpetuates an indifferent populace. On a larger scale, it hinders our ability as a country to progress towards ideals that reflect the will of the people. Now that we've learned about the origins of the Electoral College, as well as some of its fundamental flaws, what should be proposed instead? In my opinion, while components of the Electoral College have been successful, the best way forward would be to distribute each state's electorates proportionally amongst the candidates, rather than award every electorate to the candidate who receives the highest percentage of votes. In this system, every vote will have a direct impact on the distribution of the state's electorates, and in turn, a direct impact on the outcome of the election. Not only would this result in elections that were more reflective of the general population, it would also increase voter turnout, as each vote would have an effect regardless of the state one resides. This is incredibly important, as according to the Pew Research Center, the United States ranks 27th among industrialized countries in voter turnout percentage. On top of this, keeping the 538 total electorates would continue to safeguard regions with lower population densities, keeping them sufficiently represented, and all while avoiding what our friend John Adams had called tyranny of the masses. Proportional distribution would not only result in our legislators more accurately reflecting our value, but also reinvigorate an increasingly apathetic voter base. So that may have been a lot to digest. Let's review. The Electoral College, while beneficial in many ways, has led to widespread underrepresentation and an inhibited voter turnout. One possible solution would be to award the electorates proportionally as opposed to the winner-take-all method we see today. This would create a system that is more representative and could even increase the amount of people that come out to vote. The way in which we carry out our elections is relevant to each and every one of us. Decisions made by our legislators, while not always evident on a day-to-day basis, affect the lives of both you and the ones you care about most. The more representative our elections become, the greater we fulfill the intent of those who came before us, to maintain a government that is of the people, by the people, and for the people. Thank you.